It's the Celtic people. Actually, there's two branches of the Celtic nations, and one is called Brythonic, and that'd be like your Welsh, your Breton, and your Cornish. And their music's quite a bit different than the music that I do, but it would technically still be Celtic music because they are Celtic people. But the side of it that I'm part of is the Goidelic branch, and that would be um, the Gaelic, you want, if you want, in English languages, and that's Irish, Scottish Gaelic, and Manx Gaelic from the Isle of Man, and they're all very closely related. Those other languages like Welsh and Breton are a little more distant, so they're two branches of the same family. And in the what happened is there's some debate among scholars about whether Scottish Gaelic and Irish Gaelic or Gaeilge evolved at the same time along the western fringe of those islands, or if there was a kingdom, an Irish kingdom from Ulster that established itself in Scotland. So that kingdom was called Dalriada, and it went from Ulster to Argyll. Argyll means the landing of the Gaels, and so
Okay.
the conventional idea is that Gaelic spread out from that kingdom, and eventually it covered much of Scotland. The previous language in Scotland before that, or languages, would have been
Anglo-Saxon.
Pictish. No, the Anglo-Saxons
Oh,
came later.
yeah,
Pictish
that's later, right?
is another Celtic language, but people don't have much of it. So there's a lot of supposition
Okay.
of what Pictish sounded like. There's just a couple of stone inscriptions.
Okay. So
And so
how old are we talking? Like 2,000 years, 1,500 years?
Gaelic is very, very old. Yeah, like we're talking
Yeah,
about, like I think Dalriada was like
pre-Rome, right?
year 500 or something when it
Okay.
moved from Ireland into Scotland. So ancient Irish, if you want, as the origin language of all the Gaelic languages, or Gaelic language, however you want to say, that's coming on 2,000 years, I would say. And there's this particular approach to music that in Ireland and Scotland, there again, there's a lot of overlap between those two music cultures. They're not identical, you know, but there's a shared. We steal the best tunes from each other is the best way to say it. But
Love
we
it.
do it. We play them with our own accent, and so that's the Scottish and Irish side of things. Now, in a bunch of people got cleared out of their homes in the Highland clearances, right? They were burned out of their homes and forced to leave, and that's in after the 1745 Jacobite uprising. There's a big crackdown on the Gaelic world by the crown, and then so some people leave then, and then in the generations that follow, they pass a lot of laws. You can't in the original days of the clans, your wealth was how many men you could raise to fight, and if you think about it, it's like a bunch of little kingdoms, right?
Mhm.
And so what the crown did was saying, no, like I'm going to divide this land up into lots and charge you tax accordingly. And you have to figure out a way to pay that tax on all your lands. And if every generation, we're going to take estate taxes from you. So, and by the way, the leaders of your clans have to study in the South. They have to go to school in English language institutions in the lowlands of Scotland or in England. And so, in a couple of generations, the leadership of the clans no longer spoke the language of their own people, right?
Yeah.
And now they have their best buddies from private school are all English people,
Yeah.
and so they get cut off from their own people, and that leads to this tax burden, and this they're trying to fund extravagant lifestyles in the South. They find out that there's this sheep that gets bred in France that can pretty much eat anything and survive anywhere, and it provides nice soft wool. And it's called the Cheviot sheep or Cheviot. And so they bring that over to Scotland, and they decide these people are in the way. So at one point, having a big clan was major mighty. Now they're just superfluous. So they literally started burning people out of their homes and forced them to leave.
That's
And
crazy.
a lot of the people that left came to Canada, and a lot of those people came to the Maritimes, especially Cape Breton. And
When did
so
your ancestors come?
in the early 1800s, for the most part, depending on
Okay.
which branch of the family I want to follow. My father's direct family is 1804 from the Isle of Lewis, but this happened to many branches of my family about the same within the same sort of 40-year time period.
Okay.
So it's late 18th century, and it went up until about 1850 that this was happening. So we continued. So a lot of Scottish Gaels came to Cape Breton,
To escape.
and so when they got to Cape Breton, they landed in uninhabited communities, and all their neighbors were Gaels. So really, up until the First World War, like Cape Breton was as Gaelic as Quebec is French. You know, the bigger cities, it wasn't as much. It was a bit of a mix of people coming in for work in mines and mills and whatever, and steel plants. So in the city, English was the language everybody could agree on, you know. So when your
Yeah.
family came in off the farm, if they came from Shetty Camp, they started speaking English. And from French, if they came from Mabu or Iona, they started speaking English, you know, if they went into the mines. But that happened a lot more recently, right? But for a good 100 years, they kept the language and the culture alive. And the music is the language, and the music of these people are intertwined. The way that you can hear the rhythm of the language in the tunes. It's like if you hear like if you hear diddle da da diddle da da dum diddle da, that's the stress of the language. So Kimber hash if smission Nathan Bishop really me on an Ellen Cape Breton agus have a forach on English Bay, right? So you hear that, and so if you're listening to the way that it goes in and out, and the little clip and the long and the short, so you get to like
Right.
something like a song, like if you could hear it like Hanin the Kakapruaka Savullandu Hanin the Kakapruaka Savullandu Hari, right? So that's
Nice.
that's the language, and when you hear the fiddle music or the pipe music, you can hear that the rhythm of the language is in the music.
Right.
And so
And the
one of the
drum,
reasons
too.
why musician and the music side always want to try to learn to step dance and try to learn some of the language is that it's going to come in the music playing a little more authentically if you have those things, like if you've danced to it, and if you can sing the tunes and understand how the language goes, it helps a lot. So basically, at a certain point, the music industry is trying to market Irish music, and Scottish music and Cape Breton music, and what do we call this? It's all pretty close to the same stuff, you know. We're going to call it Celtic music because they all call themselves Celtic, and we need to put it somewhere in the record store, right? So it's and that's fine. It's true, but it's no
Not preserving
label is
history.
perfect, right? When you're
It's
talking about
inaccurate.
nothing could be I have no better answer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like if you have a guy from Breton playing a bombard, right? He's playing Celtic music, but me and an Irish guy both played jigs and reels, you know? Like we both play the same kind of dances. We might not dance the same dance to them, but we play the same kind of tunes. If you listen to Welsh music or you listen to Breton music, they have their own tradition of different kind of dance tunes and different rhythms, and and that would technically be Celtic. Even Galicia, Spain, is technically Celtic music. There's a great piper named Carlos Nunez from there, but is it the same genre? It's hard to say. It's really it's definitely the outer limit of the genre, if anything. Like but I appreciate it. It's excellent stuff, but I don't speak the same language. Does that make sense? Where if I
Yeah.
play music with someone from Scotland or Ireland or Newfoundland, we have enough in common that we can sit down and play. There's
Yeah.
differences, but we kind of speak a common tongue in a way,
Such
Yeah,
a good
that's interesting.
explanation. Very good explanation.
That's
That's so
good.
interesting.
It really is. You simplified it for us.
That's
Well,
true.
also the Celtic culture is so old, right? Like they were
Yeah.
big too. They were like all over Europe too,
Yeah,
right? In France, and like they spread like pretty big.
Yeah, the Celts at one point, were a very dominant force before the Romans sort of ascended.
Yeah.
And a lot of a lot of people have sort of an older Celtic substrata underneath what later got Latinized or Romanized. Like the Gauls in France were Celts, you know,
Okay.
That's right.
and so there's there's linguistic connections, even though French is for sure a vulgar Latin language. There are Celtic and Germanic elements in it because of the Gauls and the Franks, right? And
Yeah,
so
I was in the mountains of in south of France in the Alps, and there's this place where they have these old like Celtic, like they're shelters, like they're like thousands of years old, and they go back all the way to Celtic times, but they
yeah,
still keep them around. They're all over in the mountains. It's wild.
for sure.
Wow.
So there's sort of two Celtic cultures in France, right? Like there's that Gaul culture from the original inhabitants of most of France, and then when the Anglo-Saxons took over Britain, they basically pushed the Celts that were there to the west, and some of them crossed the English Channel, and that's what Brittany is. And that's why Brittany and Wales have a very similar language, because basically Brittany is Little Britain, people from Britain who got pushed into France by the Anglo-Saxons.
Yeah, super interesting.
But then then of course the Vikings who went to France became the Normans, and they
Yeah.
took over England for 400 years, and that's why English has 60% French vocabulary now.
Yeah.
So,
It's so fascinating. Yeah, exactly. Crazy.
so
yeah.
whenever someone gets mad at me about Anglicism, when they're speaking French, I always remind them how much French is in English,
Yeah,
Well, that's right.
Exactly.
Like
Space.
something as simple as beef, beef
Yeah.
and
It's beef.
pork, right? Like you don't say
Yeah.
cow, no, you say beef.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's funny.
all the fancy words are French,
Yeah.
all the really simple words are German, and all the fancy words are French.
That's hilarious.
We eat, that's German, but we want to be fancy about it, we dine, right?
Yeah.